NHS trusts, and a shortfall of more than £2 billion has already been predicted for the coming year.
Let's speak now to Rob Webster, the Chief Executive of the NHS Confederation, which represents hospitals. Morning to you. And the figures are just staggering. £2.2 billion deficit this year. What's going on?
These figures won't come as any surprise to people working in the National Health Service. What we've been saying for some time is that the financial challenges facing us are the greatest for a generation. And this report is a helpful dose of reality around how we're going to have to look at changing the way we deliver services and the way that we invest in provision over the next few years if we're going to make that right.
OK, so where is this deficit coming from? Is there anything particular that is costing trusts this amount of money, which means they're in deficit?
So there are a combination of factors, but the simple fact is that over the last few years, demand and the cost of meeting that demand has been ahead of the income and the efficiencies that providers have been able to make. There have been a number of reasons for that. What we're seeing next year and the year after is that the Chancellor has voted for additional funds for the NHS, and those funds will be significant for 2 years. What we have to do is make the next 2 years the ones where we begin to address the underlying problems in NHS providers in terms of their income and care delivery. And that's about two things. That's about making sure that there's enough money going into providers to deliver care in the ways that we deliver it today, and also that some of that money is put towards transforming care so we deliver care very differently, because that's the only way we'll have a sustainable system in the future.
OK, and you mentioned the money. The Health Minister, David Pryor, saying the government's committed to the values of the NHS, which is why we're investing £10 billion in its own plan for the future, including £6 billion up front by next year. So there is money coming into the NHS.
There is. We should be under no illusion, though, that we face the biggest challenges that we've ever done in terms of efficiencies over the next 5 years. And what this report sets out quite clearly is that the national bodies, politicians, have to be more coherent in terms of the things that they're asking of trusts and clinical commissioning groups, and then they have to try and create the right sort of environment for them to succeed. I think we would all welcome the extra money that's coming in. The big risk for us, I think, is that we've got a fighting chance for the NHS. If we don't back that with social care funding, particularly next year, then we won't have any chance, because if you look at what happens in the service and where the pressure comes from, often it's from older people who've become frail in communities, who aren't getting the support that they need, who then become iller and then end up in hospital. We know that social care funding isn't going up as quick as NHS funding, particularly in the next year, and we need to address that quickly if we're going to give the NHS any chance of succeeding. And
we have talked about social care funding quite a lot on breakfast. Let's talk about these efficiencies that you've mentioned several times in your answers. When are these going to happen? When do you think they will start making a difference?
We should reflect that the NHS has made significant efficiencies over the last few years. The National Audit Office shows that. We've got to make efficiencies in two ways. Lord Patrick Carter has done a lot of work with trusts around how they deploy staff differently and how they buy services and goods differently to be more efficient. So we do the same thing cheaper. The other big efficiencies...
Is that happening? Is that beginning to happen and make a difference?
That has been happening, and what he says is that there's about £5 billion of the £22 billion gap that we're going to have that we can fill through those means. The rest of it has to come through other means, and the big change is by doing things differently. So what we do is we provide care up front, so we focus on prevention. We give targeted and tailored support for older people in communities, and by keeping them well, it's better for them, it's better for the service, and it should be cheaper overall. That's where the efficiencies need to come from.
Let's talk about the sort of practicalities of running a deficit from a trust. I mean, is that in itself, the fact that they owe money, costing them money as well?
It costs them money, and over and above that, every accountable officer in the NHS, every chief executive, has within them a real drive to make sure that they don't bust their finances and they deliver safe, high-quality services. If you get to a position where the vast majority of providers are in deficit, they've got somebody looking over their shoulder constantly checking how they're getting back into surplus, how they're making sure they're managing their services, and that stops them from getting on with the job of transforming care. That's the real issue here, and what the NAO report shows is that the interventions faced by trusts, from the Care Quality Commission, from Monitor, from the Trust Development Authority, from NHS England, from the Department of Health in these circumstances, stop them from getting on and succeeding. That's got to change.
Rob Webster, CEO of NHS Confederation, thanks for your time this morning.